Hello,
I'm Julian.
and I am Tom. Hi, everybody.
We're Team Binge, and we are here for the third time, and hopefully not the last time, to talk about The Return of the King, which is, you guessed it, the third movie in the Lord of the Rings series. If you're joining us for the first time, cool, hang out with us. I don't have any follow-up to that. This movie is as long as this podcast will be, so buckle up.
I thought it's supposed to be twice as long.
Twice as long. So this is going to be an 8-hour podcast.
6 hours and 40 minutes.
And what's funny is Tom and I are not real learned on Lord of the Rings lore, so it's just two dudes talking about a movie they don't really understand, but they really like a lot.
We're going to make up a lot of stuff.
That's right, and we're going to mispronounce some people's names, and please add us. Tom, let him know once again, why are we going through the Lord of the Rings movies?
We are getting hyped because we are super excited to watch the new Amazon Prime series, The Rings of Power, which is coming out. And it's supposed to follow the second age of Middle-earth, so it's kind of like the forming of the rings. Amazon's throwing just gobs of money at it, I think close to $500 million.
And we would like to get some of that money.
Yes. If nothing else, the production and just the show itself should be awesome. So we're super excited about it. Like Julian mentioned, we are Lord of the Rings fans. We've read books. Julian's read the Silmarillion. So we have some knowledge. We are not experts. So if we say anything that's wrong, go ahead and correct us on our Twitters, our Instagrams at Team Binge. We'd love to hear your corrections.
Think of us like Lord of the Rings bros. We don't know a whole lot about it, but we're super pumped about it. And we both have the ring inscription tattooed around our biceps so that when we're getting yoked up in the gym, people know that we know about the One Ring and the White Tree of Gondor, and that we're not fans of the Stewards, other than Boromir, but he's dead. Spoiler.
Of course.
Let's jump into it, Tom. We're going to do a summary, then hit some categories, and we are going to... start off by saying, last time I asked you, Tom, do you rank these movies? And you said The Two Towers was your favorite out of the three. I don't know that you asked me the same question. You might have. I don't listen to the podcast. But what I can definitely tell you is I like this movie. I like this movie a lot. I love this whole trilogy. All I can say is I know this movie is not my favorite one of the three. But I still love it.
Okay.
It's still great. There's still a lot of stuff in here that I love, and we'll get into it. I just want to point out that if I had to rank them, this one would not be one. I don't know where it would be, but it would not be one. And it would not be two.
I think we did talk about that. I think I said I like Two Towers, and I think you mentioned you like The Return of the King. We can go back and check the tape if there's a way to do that. I don't know if there is at this point. But yeah, I think what my deal is with this movie, it's fantastic. The action set pieces are just over the top and amazing, especially for like the time that it was filmed with the effects and the CG. It still looks pretty dang solid. But what this movie I think is kind of known for is its 13 different endings at the end. Where it's just, it could end, it could cut, it could fade to black, it could fade to black. And I remember even seeing this in theaters and like, man, I got to use a bathroom. And I just can't because it just keeps going. It's like the Energizer Bunny.
Yep.
But other than that, I think, yeah, the movie is just spot on and does a fantastic job of buttoning up this whole quest.
I think this is where Peter Jackson got the first taste of, you know what, I can really drag this out for as long as possible and no one can stop me. Oh, by the way, I'm going to take the Hobbit book and make it into 8 movies. We have not talked about him enough. I wanted to bring this up because this movie starts off very strong. Howard Shore is the one that does the theme, and there is something so like epic and eerie about like that through line, that theme music. I'm not even going to attempt it because I'll do it wrong. But it is both like unsettling, but also epic and beautiful, much like The Ring of Power. And that's probably what he was inspired by. Anyways, let's dive into the movie. This one opens up, and Tom and I will do favorite scenes towards the end. I don't want to spoil any of which one my favorite scene is, but we open up with Smeagol murdering Deagle, who is, I believe, his brother. All I want to say about this part is, why are underwater scenes so difficult to film? Why do all, like... I don't know that I've ever watched a movie other than Deep Blue Sea where underwater filming went off without a hitch. There's a point where he's being dragged by the fish, and it just... Anyways, love these movies. Don't want to nitpick. We watched Smeagol transform into Gollum, and for movies that are so dark, I like how all the Hobbit scenes are always very light and fluffy, but this one starts with a Hobbit murder. And you're like, okay, yeah, we're starting off with some light Hobbit murder.
This scene was apparently filmed to be in Two Towers. It was supposed to be in like when they actually introduce Gollum and they say his name and he's kind of getting ready to come on camera. They were supposed to do this little flashback and show how kind of he transformed. But I really love it here in terms of opening it up. And we already got the cliffhanger from the last Two Towers at the end of that one where he's going to kind of
lead them up to
Frodo and Sam.
Them up to Shelob,
yeah.
Shiloh, however you say
exactly. It. So getting his kind of whole transformation is fantastic. And again, they used some of those practical effects, which was really cool. And I do appreciate that they allowed Andy Serkis to be, Smeagol in this, as that actor, as opposed to trying to cast somebody else. Because that's apparently what they wanted to do initially. They didn't want Andy Serkis to be the Hobbit version of Smeagol. Like they wanted him just to do
I don't know who else could have done that voice.
I think that was it. Yeah, they needed him for it.
I can't stand that voice. I mean, he does a great job. I'm just saying I wouldn't be friends with Smeagol. I'd be like, oh, that's how you talk? Here, take the ring. I don't really want to be your friend anymore. We get a cutscene of Frodo and the weight of the ring, like dragging him down. The days are growing darker. Little Chekhov's gun. We're rationing the lembas bread. Sam's trying to be very selfless here and give Frodo all the bread. And what I thought was interesting and poignant in this moment is Sam is planning for a journey home, and you can clearly see Frodo's kind of like, "Hey, just a little news for you, Samwise, Gamgee. One-way ticket, bro. We're going to Mount Doom, and that's probably our final destination." But I do think it's interesting that, like, Sam, the optimist, like, and then Frodo, at this point, the weight and everything is dragging him to the point where I think sweet, sweet death might just be a relief for him.
Well, I think that's why Sam is who he is. Like, he's the optimist. He's the one, even though Frodo knows it's likely not going to happen, like, he needs to hear this in these moments to know, like, he needs to keep going on and have that hope.
Light in the shadow. We then cut, because we're catching up with all the characters. We get AGLGE and the others. They arrive at the destruction of Isengard. I will do this once, and only once, because I'm going to use this acronym the whole time we do this podcast, because it speeds things up. AGLGE stands for Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, Gandalf, and Aeromir. That ND can be used with Eowyn, Eomir, any of them. Treebeard, even though it starts with a T.
It's funny, though, because that was actually today's Wordle, AGLGE.
Oh, really? You didn't send it to me. Interesting. You must be playing with someone else.
Sorry.
Tom and I do Team Wordle, which means we both try to get it together, and we fail together often. Pip and Merry are drunk and high. I wrote that in my notes as they dance on the smoldering wreckage of Isengard. It's pretty great. I do like the moment where Treebeard greets Gandalf, and he calls him Young Master Gandalf, and you're kind of realizing...
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, because Gandalf's been, he's hundreds of years old, maybe thousands, and then Treebeard's even older. Sauron's locked in the tower. Gandalf is like, no, we don't need to wreck the tower. He's got no more power. This leads us to the Pantaleer. I wrote it
Pantomime?
Somewhere. No. The Seeing Stone. They've got a name. I wrote it in here somewhere.
Oh, I don't
know
what it's
about
called.
it. This is where Pippin finds it, like rolling around in the pond. And he apparently sees something. Him and Gandalf exchange very dark looks. And that's when you know those two are going to team off and have to do something together, because Pippin went and got that glowing bowling ball out of the water.
Can I ask you a question here?
You can ask whatever questions you like, Tom.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of these times you're not going to allow me to ask. I watched just this regular version. I did not watch the extended one. Neither did you, correct?
Yes.
Or did you watch the extended? Okay,
no,
say this movie was long enough. I thought there was a scene, and you had mentioned it, and I felt like I had seen it before, where Saruman gets thrown off by Wormtongue. But that does not happen in this one that I watch, unless I blinked or something. Does that only happen in the extended?
Here's the crazy story. I am pretty sure I've seen that scene. I don't think I saw it also in this. I was just going to bypass it because I figured I maybe hopped on my phone at some point and missed the scene. But maybe that is only in the extended version. Because, yeah, in this one,
I think so.
We don't see Saruman's demise, which essentially is Wormtongue pushing him off of the tower and him doing a sweet jackknife dive into the water.
Maybe we got it mixed with another fiery figure falling off of a large tower. I don't know. We'll find out.
Oh, man. Spoilers when we get to funniest scenes or times I laugh the hardest. A little bit of Denethor taking a fiery dive off the... Oh, no. All right. Anyways, we cut to Rohan. They're hailing the victorious dead. I love Rohan. I love everything about him. Like, Tolkien was like, listen, these guys are going to be horse Vikings. They're going to cheer death. They're great. Aragorn and Éowyn share a drink. Theoden's like, hey, he's a good man. I'm happy for you. You two are going to have beautiful babies. And I do think it's interesting here that Theoden recognizes that it was Aragorn that saved the people at Helm's Deep. I think he's finally come to the conclusion. He's like, listen, Éowyn, I was like, hey, let's ride out and die. And then Aragorn's like, no, let's ride out and save people.
Yeah, and I think it sets up, Theoden seeing Aragorn as the king. Like, not just all of a sudden he's like, oh, okay, you can be king because you're Isildur's heir. Like, no, he understands and recognizes that Aragorn is a leader and deserves to be the king.
Good point. Deserves to be followed. We get this quick conversation between Gandalf and Aragorn about their worried about Frodo. And he's like, what does your heart tell you? And it would have been great if Gandalf had been like, dead. Just, he's dead. There's no hope,
For
Aragorn. No hope. But instead, they smile at each other, and then, or a writer should have burst in and be like, Frodo is dead. It would have been great. Anyways, this movie should have been a comedy, but it's not. Although there are funny moments like Denethor jumping off the tower. Smeagol and Golem are talking about some cold-blooded murder and getting the precious. Sam hears about the murderer, and there's a lot of fat shaming of Sam by the murderer, Smeagol / Golem. Whenever he calls him fat, sure. I was like, oh man, cuts him to the quick. Which you would think if he was only living on lembas bread for, I don't know, months while walking, 30 miles a day, he wouldn't be the fat hobbit that Golem claims
Sean Astin
he is.
He's not in Rudy shape for this movie.
I thought he looked great. But I like my hobbits a little bit plump. That's me. Sam might have handled the moment a little bit better because Golem essentially taunts him into like losing his temper. So there's a little life lesson for you kids: when a murderous Golem taunts you, don't go for it. All right.
Well, and he's laying the groundwork for the continued deception later. But yeah, I agree. He could have done a little bit more to let Frodo know exactly what was said, because when Sam listens to this, he openly hears him saying he is going to murder both of them.
Sure.
And Frodo's having none of it.
Sure. Yeah, he just got to once again, characters communicating. Hey, Frodo, while we were sleeping, I woke up a little early. He didn't know I was awake. He was talking about murdering us. Let's not follow this guy. But they don't have that conversation. I only wrote Legolas talks about something menacing and looks serious.
Classic legs.
Oh man, I'm so glad you brought up that discussion about Legolas last podcast, because I've thought about it a lot and I'm sticking with my opinion. This is where they're all sleeping in the hall, and it's like slumber party time at Theoden's house. Of course, one person, the trickster's got to wake up and go do something. So Pippin goes and takes the Palantir. That's what it's called. Sauron sees him, and they get this slow motion fight with a flaming bowling ball as Pippin writhes around on the ground. That's a word. And my wife, who I love, was like, well, that doesn't look great. But once again, we're not going to nitpick. There's sometimes we go slow-mo in these movies, and I'm just like, why? Why do we need the weird slow-mo? We don't need the weird slow-mo.
He is pantomiming with a Palantir, so, it fits. He's rumbling around, jumping, expressing his body. It's great.
Sure. Those words are close. Palantir and pantomime. I see where your brain's going, Tom. Gandalf's like, what did you see? And he's like, I saw the White Tree of Gondor dead, Minas Tirith. And Gandalf's like, I know all the plans of the enemy. And I was like, okay, good. Thank you for making this story easy. There's a conversation about the heir of Elindir needing to come forth, and Sauron. And this is kind of where they're like, hey, we're going to kind of explain the plot to you, which I appreciate, because once again, there's a lot going on in these. I only wish Galadriel had come on one more time and been like, the fate of men is going... I can't do her voice because her voice is great. But the conversation is then with Aragorn and Theoden. And Aragorn's like, come on, guys, we got to help him. And Theoden is like, why? Why should we ride to the aid of those who did not ride to ours? And if I was there, I'd be like, ooh, solid point. Fair point. And Aragorn's stumped by this. But now that Sauron thinks that Pippin has the ring because he's a halfling, him and Gandalf have to ride to Gondor, and they ride on the sweetest horse that anyone's ever ridden on. They get to ride on the old Lord of Horses, Shadowfax. And it's, I don't know, the friendship between Merry and Pippin, like in contrast to like Frodo and Samwise is a little bit more serious, but like I still think there's a deep like friendship between Pippin and Merry, where they're kind of the comic relief, much like Gimli. But it is nice to see them have moments. And it was cool the way that Tolkien did this, where it was like, all right, you know, Pippin's going to be sworn to Gondor, Merry's going to be sworn to Rohan, and like they're each going to have their moment as warriors, but they go their own path, so to speak. So yeah, I always found that kind of fun. Tom, if you had to swear an oath of allegiance, or, well, not oath of allegiance, because that's then kind of, you're either going with Denethor or Theoden, and I think we all know who the better leader is. Are you a Gondor man or are you a Rohan man? What are you, when you wake up in the morning and you pour that cup of coffee, are you a Gondor man or are you a Rohan man?
Listen, Gondor is a beautiful city. It's got probably some beautiful vistas. It is kind of overlook Mordor, which isn't probably fantastic. And like you mentioned, a lot of stairs. I'd much prefer the open ranges of Rohan.
Okay. We're both Rohan men then. We're Dapper Dan man and Rohan man. Say again?
We're Rohanians.
Rohanians. Of the Rohirrim.
Rohanian Rhapsodies.
There's several times... Oh, good on you. There are several times where Pippin is called a fool, and then he's called the worst. And then I thought to myself, Pippin's taking a lot of beating here, just verbally, by this fellowship that he voluntarily joined, and has been of some use. And then Merry gives him the most precious possession, the long bottom leaf, or whatever, the rest of the long bottom leaf.
The weed.
It's like, you smoke too much, Pippin. Which, hey, no shaming here, all right? Maybe all of us smoke a little bit too much at times. Not any of that weed, only tobacco for me, thank you very much. Only the healthy stuff. We then cut to elves walking through the forest, and, man.
Scooping up some field mice, bopping them on the head.
Okay. That's a song
Listen,
that I don't...
you set me up. You're talking about elves walking through the forest. I can't not finish that classic.
That is a song that I have not had any therapy to discuss. What is it about these people that they walk so slow through the forest and they're always dressed in their Sunday best? They are walking through the forest on their way to the ship, and this is where Arwen, who then sees Aragorn as I would say an old dad. He's kind of already graying when this child is. Yes. I don't see a lot of football playing and baseball pitching between this. He's like, listen, son, I had you later in life. I'm going to throw the ball. You go chase it down. Dad's going to sit here and watch I don't know. Something tells me that in this world, lacrosse is a big sport. The young boy the young boy's got to be someone's kid, right? Some cast member's kid. Or they're like, listen, give me the most beautiful elvish child you can find. And there was a casting call. And this kid looks right down the barrel into our souls as we're all like, all of us are like, yeah, we'd give up mortality to be that kid's dad. And And this, I referred to this in the last pod. I had the wrong movie, but this is where Arwen makes the choice. She's going to the Grey Havens to take the ships, to live eternally. And this is where she turns around. I do also want to mention, Tom, that at one point we mentioned that Arwen was kind of like a love interest. I do want to bring up that Arwen is a super dope warrior in that river scene where she takes on those guys. So I love Arwen as a character. I think the daughter of Aerosmith does a great job. And I just wish she got to show up and cut off more heads than she does. I
think that's always a critique of like the Lord of the Rings or maybe with just not only the book series but with the movies for sure, is there's not a whole lot of like female empowerment. Like you get this amazing scene later on with Éowyn being able to stand up to the Night's King or the Witch King, which is just absolutely fantastic and gets me every time. But I couldn't agree more. There needs to be more of this. And I am looking forward to the Rings of Power because I do think we see in the trailers like Galadriel being a lot more like, aggressive warrior as opposed to just, wood and or an elf in a forest just whispering sweet nothings.
Sure. Sweet nothings. The kid looks great. He touched my soul. I'm glad that Arwen made the choice that she made. She then has a conversation with Elrond. She's like, you have the ability to look into the future. And he's like, yeah, I looked into your future and I saw death. She's like, well, that's not fair because there's also a son. And he's like, oh, yeah, there's a son too. And then he's like, all right, well, I'm going to reforge the sword, which is the sword that Boromir, as every swordsman does, picked up and shoved into his finger to see whether or not it was still sharp, because he's an idiot. But then we hear the quote, Boromir's not an idiot. I apologize. I love Boromir. And I don't know that they, like in this scene, they do part of it, but I looked up the whole thing, and this has always been a great poem that Tolkien wrote, so I'm going to read it verbatim. And honestly, it's got a title, but I didn't write down the title. But it's, all that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. And so this is the line about him taking, and I am blanking on the name of the sword, but the Isildur's sword that he uses, it was his father's sword, to cut the ring from Sauron.
Jonathan.
No, his name is not Jonathan.
It's not Jonathan the sword.
Damn you. Not Jonathan. When Thomas the sword, also the tank engine. Anyways, you ruined a really good poem, Tom. Darn you. No, it
is awesome. Like, this is him taking the sword and like the sword being the catalyst for him like becoming king. Like once he gets handed this sword, it's him accepting kind of that mantle, which I think is just fantastic. And when I think later on in this movie, when he gets it handed to him, like the way he rips it out of his sheath and just like presents it, it's awesome and powerful.
Yeah, someone loses an eye during that scene. I think in the extended cut they do some blacksmithing, which is something I've always wanted to do. I know I'd probably get burned and be maimed, but it's always fun to watch people blacksmith. This is, of course, where Arwen has made her decision. She's going to become mortal, and to let us know that, L. Ron Hubbard's like, the light of the Eldar is leaving you. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Now we know she's made her choice. Narsil is reforged into Anduril. And I do want to point out in the books, this happens on the first visit in Rivendell. So in the Fellowship, that's when he actually gets his sword and this happens. I would like to point out that I went online and I did not buy it, but you could buy the sword. And as a grown man at this age, I should not be looking at these things. But when when a movie is 3 hours long, and an hour is 30 minutes, but when a movie is 3 hours long and you've been drinking and you watch this movie, you're like, I've got some wall space where I could put a 6-foot sword on the wall, and that's not weird, right? So I'm slowly talking myself into it. And Tom, I'm not going to lie. If one ends up on my wall, one is also going to end up on your wall. So be
Two
ready.
for one.
Be ready for that.
I'll take give me Legolas's little mini swords or daggers that he has. I'd rather have those than a 18-inch sword on my wall. Or not 18-inch, 18-foot sword. 18 inches, little guy.
Oh man, so you'd rather have Legolas's? I'd get you Legolas's bow, but I'm afraid that if I got you a bow,
You know what I want?
you would
You know
hurt
what
yourself.
I want Legolas's forearm guard. But I do appreciate them, even if that's how it was in the books. I like how they held this off, because it is more dramatic of him kind of accepting the mantle of king, like we kind of talked about.
Right.
And it kind of juxtaposes too a little bit with him giving Theoden his sword, right? Because like when Theoden got out of his like trance from Sauron, he gives him the sword, which kind of like officially gets him out, if you will. So
you will feel
cool.
better if you feel the weight of the of your sword in your hand. The names Narsil, Anduril, it's like red and white flame is the meaning. Not that anyone cares about this, but the nerds, of which I include myself. And then Anduril is Flame of the West, the sword that was broken. So, sword stuff's cool. Blacksmith is cool. Blacksmithing is cool. I don't know what the verb there is. Doesn't matter. We're back in Gondor, Minas Tirith, the capital of Gondor. Everyone in this city has got dark hair and great calves because there are so many stairs, Tom. So many stairs. Just shapely thighs and strong calves because you got to walk up. This is one of those cities where you're like, hey, I'm going to the post office. And then like you're 12 stories down and you're like, oh, I forgot the letters. And then you got to walk back up. And it's just a terrible place because it's straight up and down. Have you ever gone on vacation to a place that is like up and down? Have you ever been in a resort where it's like their main theme is waterfalls? So it's just up and down all day.
Have you? I think you have.
We once went to a place in Costa Rica where it was all like salt springs. And so the salt springs all ran down via gravity. And so it was a lot of like up and down, which is good because when you're eating...
work off that buffet.
Yeah, when you're eating that buffet, you got all that guac. You got to really...
Walk the guac off.
Walk the guac off. We got ourselves a license plate. License plate and a t-shirt. I think this is where we meet Lord Denethor, who's Boromir's father and Faramir's father. He's the caretaker of the throne.
Seems nice.
Seems like a lovely gentleman. This is great. So Gandalf, before they go in, is like, Pippin, listen, don't mention Boromir. Don't mention the ring. You know what? It's better if you just don't talk. And as a father, alleged father of a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, this conversation happens anytime we visit any relative. It's like, listen, guys, I know we said a lot about these guys the other day while Mommy and Daddy were day drinking. But listen, you can't mention this, you can't mention this, and you can't mention this. And remember to say please and thank you. You know what? Better yet, just don't talk about Nintendo, don't talk at all. Like, that's essentially the conversation that every parent has when they roll up to Lord Denethor's house. Denethor, of course, has already heard the bad news. He's already got the Horn of Gondor that has been severed in half. Very quickly, Pippin throws Gandalf's advice aside, and he's like, I offer my service as payment for the death of your son Boromir. And Gandalf's immediately like, regret. There's a part in Scrubs where they talk about every time you make a mistake, an opera guy stepping in the background and singing a mistake. And that's what I think about whenever Pippin does this. He tells Denethor to light the beacons and send help for Rohan. And this is where Denethor's like, listen, I know who's riding in your fellowship. His name is Aragorn, and you would supplant me as the ruler of Gondor. And I gotta be honest, it's probably taken me a couple of watches and a couple of reads to kind of realize, like, Denethor's position. Like, his family has run this town, like, for years and years in the absence of a king. And then all of a sudden, this ranger from the north is gonna come in and supplant him. And he does point out, he's like, hey, Gandalf, you didn't happen to mention that the heir of Isildur is, like, showing up to take over, by the way.
Listen, Aragorn's really hot right now.
He's so dang hot right now.
But I think we get mentioned a little bit later, like, Denethor, sure, he's been there and he's, been acting as a steward, but his inaction has caused a lot of the pains that they're going through now about not coming to the aid of Rohan or just being a complete recluse. So
I like to think Denethor's main thing that he has been doing as the steward of Gondor is really pushing farm to table type, like, produce and, like, eating. He's like, listen, guys, we can get all this food from factories that's made from chemicals and, mac and cheese with, like, the orange dye, or we can get these sweet cherry tomatoes that you can grow out in your own gardens. And here's the deal with cherry tomatoes. You don't pop the whole thing in your mouth. You just put a little bit in your mouth, and then you bite it with your teeth, and then it runs down your chin. Like, farm to table, man. That's where it's at. That's where the flavor's at. Anyways, I think from here we're finding out that Pippin is realizing that he's now going to become a guard of the Citadel. I do appreciate how quickly they were like, hey, here's your issued kit. That's got the White Tree of Gondor on it. Put that over the armor. Here's the sword that's probably more of a dagger because you're a half-man. And Gandalf starts to talk to him about the coming battle. We cut to Osgiliath, which I mispronounced several times, and I will mispronounce several times more. If you would like me to pronounce Osgiliath better, you can write us at teambingepodcast@gmail.com or send money to our rival at the website redcross.org. Drives us crazy when you
I appreciate you still spelling it out.
Well, once again, I haven't gotten the domain yet, but I will one day.
Listen, just don't send it to Blue Cross. That's like an insurance company. They don't need our money.
No, they don't. Who needs insurance? Ooh, don't tell Obama.
Denethor does.
Denethor.
Fire insurance, if you know what I'm saying.
Fire insurance. I know what you're saying, Tom. I know what you're saying. If Osgiliath falls, that's the last defense before the city. We see the Witch King of Angmar leading the armies of Mordor. He's the greatest of the nine. He's the guy that stabbed Frodo in the shoulder. I would argue if he's the greatest of the nine, he probably should have stabbed him in a more critical area, not the shoulder, but that's neither here nor there.
Watching this, can I say, I remember seeing this in theaters, there was confusion about, like, is this Sauron? Because of, like, the armor and the scale of him, and, like, it definitely had Sauron vibes. And I remember, like, seeing it in theaters being like, wait, is he fighting him? So
sure,
knowing it now and paying more attention to these movies, you could tell, like, he's part of the Nazgul or whatever, but I was very confused by
he's part of the nine. He's the Witch King of Angmar. But let's let Twitter decide. Let's put out a poll. Is the Witch King of Angmar also Sauron? You tell us, Twitter. Tom will be putting out a poll later on this year in order to determine who's who. Also, is Frodo and Samwise the same character? Is Smeagol and Gollum the same character? Those will be Twitter polls that we put out because I recently read an article that you can do polls on Twitter, and so now I'm pretty hot on the idea.
Here they come.
Here they come. Should Julian get an earring? Poll on Twitter.
I'm not going to tug on that string.
Please, it's painful. I think it might be infected. Please don't pull on that string. Who knew that earlobes were so sensitive? I was going to say something else, but this is a podcast for children.
For children. It's a podcast for children.
I'm sorry, a podcast hosted by children. My bad.
It's Tree Bird and Tree Beard. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
You know what, Tom and I have something to mention. This whole podcast really is just a gateway drug so that we could do a podcast about the Disney show Bluey. So, um, for those of you children that are listening to us right now, stay tuned because we will be going through every episode of the Disney show Bluey very shortly. They're 7-minute episodes, and man, they will make you cry or make you learn a life lesson. In the way that
season 3 just dropped.
Listen, in the way that Tolkien created a language, a culture, like speeches, literature, and it turned into hours and years of media. Bluey, whoever creates Bluey, those Australians, they can crush your heart and teach you something about life in 7 minutes. It's incredible. Anyways, I digress. We cut to Frodo. Frodo's getting like pulled into Mordor. There's like some weird like green like liquid light shooting into the sky, and this is where we watch the Witch King of Angar on a Nazgul flying out, and the army of Mordor marching. And then we cut to Faramir and his team defending Osgiliath. And I love Faramir. I don't love him as much as Boromir. I think Denethor and me hold that same opinion. But I love Faramir. This is where we get the army of Mordor attacking at the river. They're doing a little amphibious assault on Osgiliath.
Now, Jillian, you are a student of history and of battle. Is this a good battle strategy to let your enemies come unabated on the river, not being attacked, have them land on the shores, run past you, and then start attacking? Is that wise?
So, great question, Tom. Really good question. And if we look at the tactician book that I have on my bookshelf across the way, no, I think what they're doing there is, one, they don't have the resources to like put a bunch of arrows into these guys as they're dropping ramp. And then the other thing is, I think there are other people past Faramir, so he's kind of letting the first wave get to them because he can then they're like letting them into the trap before they attack them. But in overwhelming odds like this, it doesn't seem like a very good strategy. I had the same thought, like, hey, if I was defending Osgiliath, what would I do? And the answer would be fill the river with oil and set it on fire when the boats rolled in. Thank you, Braveheart. Case closed. We then cut to the scene.
It was cool looking, though.
It was cool looking. And once again, I like the guy that plays Faramir's like second in command, that older guy. He's great. He meets a great demise. Very peaceful. But the way this is all shot, like the ruins of Osgiliath, the lead bad dude with his one arm that doesn't work, and his
Gothmog.
Is that his name? Gothmog?
Gothmog, yeah.
Golly.
Which I would argue, like, if this is like the orc general, like, it looks cool and it's cool makeup, but like he has like these growths that kind of go over his eye, so he can really only see well out of one eye. I don't think it would make you a fantastic warrior. It's very impractical.
Well, he's a tactician. He's a leader.
Okay.
He's a leader that is more of a thinker than strength of arm guy.
Okay, fair.
We cut to Pippin climbing up, lighting the beacon, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I love this too, because like you get then Gandalf right when he sees that first one get lit, he's like, hope is kindled, and then we get that cool montage of all the distant fires. And it goes on for a while, but I think it's really neat and impactful how it eventually just slowly works its way to Rohan. But I also think it's funny how some of the fires seemingly get lit within like seconds of each other, and I would argue like probably there's people stationed at each one of them, but it takes you at least a little bit to, you know, look up from your phone, see that the other tower is lit, and then put up your tower.
Look up from your phone.
I mean, come on. These guys can't just be staring at a distant like mountaintop for 8-hour stretches or whatever their shifts are.
Oh man, what's the pension plan on a guy that gets the remote mountain beacon job? That's like, all right, honey, I gotta go to work. All right, see you in 6 months, and it's just like 12 on, 12 off, where you're staring at the other beacon. And I'm sure there's a part of them that's like, is that beacon lit? Yeah, I think that beacon's lit. No.
Am I
That
seeing
beacon's
things?
that beacon hasn't been lit in 400 years. Is it lit? Yeah, it's lit. All right, should we light ours? You do it. All right. Like,
Wait. Look at the user manual. What does the user manual say
what
to
does
do?
the user
If the
manual-
fire goes off, what are we supposed to do?
where they at the same time they have to turn their torches. They're like on 3, 2, and they both turn their torches at the same time. Aragorn runs into the hall. He's like, Gondor calls for aid, and Theoden. Listen, if you didn't listen to the last podcast, Theoden is my dude. I love Theoden. Theoden and Rohan will answer. And it's so good. I love Theoden. He's just the best. He's the best, and I love that he lives happily ever after into the age of men after this. We then cut to Rohan getting ready to ride to war. Eowyn's like, oh, I'm just going to ride to the first point, maybe the second point. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just going to probably, this sword. I don't know. This sword. I don't know how it got on the saddle. Aragorn, not at all suspicious. If I was Aragorn, I'd be like, cool, everyone brings swords. If you got a horse and a sword, come join us, because anyone can swing a sword. And I got into a conversation with you earlier where you were swinging a sword around, and you seemed pretty competent, so let's bring you along. Theoden's like sending everyone out. He's like, go to the Rittermark, go here, gather all the men. And then he says, he's got some great lines, so he's like, so it is before the walls of Minas Tirith, the doom of men will be decided. That's not a direct quote. I was getting kind of sleepy during this 3-hour movie, but Theoden has all the greatest lines. That's all. All I want when I die is I would like this actor who plays Theoden to come to my gravesite and quote all of his Theoden lines while they shoot my ashes out of a bottle rocket into space.
I'm going to go check. Maybe he's on that Cameo app. I can have him do that for you in real life.
If he was on Cameo,
I'm looking that up for your birthday.
I would have him be like, hard to port, there's this iceberg. Ride, row hear him. And then everyone would get real confused because that's different movies. But he dies in both. Spoiler. Éomer gets his. He's like, and I guarantee this was a longer speech scene, but Carl Urban does it so well. They like splice in this moment where he's like, now is the hour, riders of Rohan. Oaths you have taken, now fulfill them all, for lord and land. And his hair looks great, and his beard looks great, and man, I would let him skewer me with his spear any day of the week. If I was an orc and I was fighting, that was not meant to be anything other than a... Anyways, this is a podcast for children.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Faramir's men have to abandon Osgiliath. The Nazgul attack. Is there a worse death than having a Nazgul pick you up in its teeth and fling you across? Like,
it doesn't seem great. I would argue, actually, I'd rather be bit by a Nazgul and potentially die more quickly than to be grabbed by its talons and then just flung across the Minas Tirith or this city.
Listen, is there a moment while you're flying through the sky where you're like, oh, this is actually kind of fun, and then, like, the impact kills you? I don't know. Are you, like, like skydiving, but your parachute doesn't open? I don't know. Who knows what human brains work? Faramir's second in command gets murdered, and this is where the main dude declares that the age of men is over. What was his name, Tom?
Mm-hmm. The Gothmog, yeah, the general, yeah.
Gothmog was the name of the Christian band I tried to start in middle school, but did not take off because we were sidelined by Crucifixius, which is, anyways, a Friday Night Lights reference. Doesn't matter. Gandalf rides out to protect the retreat. It's super cool. He does a bright light. And I kind of feel like, hey, just give everyone in Gondor a flashlight, and maybe we can defeat these dudes because they seem to hate bright lights.
They're like Mogwais from Gremlins. They don't like bright light.
Tom, this is gonna blow your mind. I don't think I've ever seen Gremlins.
Oh man, see Gremlins 2. Watch the Key and Peele skit of how they made Gremlins 2, and then watch Gremlins 2.
Okay, I like Key and Peele. I'm with you. I do also think there should be a scene where it's like, and the elves forged LED lights, and they gave 7 LED lights to the leaders of men, and they were able to shoot LED lights into the eyes of the Nazgûl. Anyways. All right, Tolkien. Maybe he can change some of the story. Faramir and Gandor talk. I'm sorry, not Gandor. That's a mixture of Gandalf and Gondor, which are a people and a person. So that's something. I'm completely sober. Faramir and Gandalf talk. They talk about Frodo. Gandalf finds out that Frodo's alive. Faramir's like, man, I gotta walk all these steps to go talk to my dad, who's not really happy with me right now. We cut to Frodo and Smeagol climbing. Sam is very suspicious of Gollum, and Gollum's like, hey, Frodo, I bet that fat hobbit's going to ask you for the ring soon. And that's where we leave those guys. Listen, I love Frodo, I love Sam, I love Gollum. But if I have a choice between like an epic battle and Nazgûl throwing dudes and like Last Stands at Osgiliath, I'm going to pick Last Stands at Osgiliath before Fat Hobbitses and Lembas spread accusations.
I'm with you, but I mean, obviously you need these scenes because you need to know what you're fighting for and what they're doing. But yeah, I agree. But like, talk about steep stairs, man. These stairs going up to the spider's lair is quite a trek. And then they're like napping, they're sleeping right on the edge. Like, no, you're not safe. I don't care how tired you are.
Right. Yeah, it's like walking out of the Grand Canyon. I'm sure there's probably signs on that pathway in Mordor where it's like, do not attempt to walk down to the bottom and back. People have died from exhaustion. The state park of Mordor asks you not to try this. We will not come after you. Also, helicopters cost a lot of money. The Witch King is like, hey, Gothmog, go attack Minas Tirith. I don't care how many people you kill, and sends him after him.
And then I think like Gothmog's like, what about Mithrandir? I think because I guess everybody calls him Mithrandir as opposed to Gandalf. Yeah. And I do appreciate that the Witch King like responds like, I will break him, which to me immediately made me think of Rocky IV. I must break you.
Sure.
So it's pretty much the classic tale of the Russians fighting the Americans.
Right. Every time I watch, as someone who grew up during the Cold War, every time I watch this movie, I see the orcs as the Russians and us as Reagan's America rising to glory. Yeah, I mean, it's just... I mean, Tolkien must have seen it too. He's a big Reagan fan.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone knows that. Yeah. Since he wrote these books 30 years prior. Predictor of the future, they say. Pippin takes the Oath of Gondor. My favorite part of this is, like, it's really long, and Pippin's, like, he's obviously stayed up all night trying to memorize it, and he's, like, struggling through the memorization, and Denethor's just, like staring at him in rapt attention, like, oh, is he gonna get it right?
He seems nice in this moment. Like, he's a little bit more, like, almost too happy here to get this guy's oath.
I think Pippin is like I don't know. He probably hasn't run into hobbits before. He sees this kind of as like a child that is trying to act like an adult. I don't know. There's something distracting about it. And then he seems super nice when he's talking to his son in the same scene where he's like, why was Osgiliath given up so quickly? Second son, least favorite. If only Boromir had been here. And then you just get this heartbreaking moment where Faramir's like, and good on Faramir. Like, this is a tough question to ask of a parent, but he's like, listen.
Especially when you know the answer.
He's like, oh, and here's some life advice for you. If you don't want the honest answer to a question, don't ask it of a family member. This is something I've had to tell my parents. Like, hey, don't ask me if you don't want an honest answer. But he's like, Father, I bet you wish that Boromir and I could change places. And, ooh.
And just so cold-hearted. He's just like, yes, I do wish that.
Ooh.
Like, ooh, man.
And then Faramir to his, I don't know. Faramir's great. Both these sons, for having such a crappy father, I mean, turned out well. I know Boromir had his flaws, but Faramir's parting words are, think better of me upon my return. And then his dad just, might as well knife him. He's like, well, that will depend on the manner in which you return, which is, ooh, it's good. I do appreciate that this is not a everyone gets a trophy moment, though. His dad's like, hey, if you come back and you kill, against odds you couldn't possibly win against, if you take Osgiliath, I'll be super proud of you. But if you come in second place, not so happy. Doesn't go on the mantle of the refrigerator. Poor Faramir.
Yeah, the initial line was, if you're not first, you're last. But they had cut it.
Doesn't even make any sense. You'd be second, you'd be third. Oh, man. That's such a great line. Golem, quickly, we cut there. He frames Sam, throws all the Lembas bread, which is much, essentially Golem is murdering them through starvation. He throws it all down the stairs. There is a point where Sam's like, what are you sneaking around for? Are you sneaking? And Golem's like, I'm not sneaking, blah, 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 blah. And then he's like, but I'm sneaking. Or the way he delivers the line, sneaking. I was like, oh, that's great. Sam playing into Golem's hand. He's like, I could carry the ring for you, Master Frodo. Don't you remember your Sam? And Frodo sees, and I don't know, maybe I'm giving Sam too much credit. Maybe Sam does want the Ring of Power so he can be the most evil, powerful elf. Or I guess he's a hobbit, so that wouldn't make much sense. But he would take
he could transform into an elf,
turn himself into an elf, but he'd still be a short one, and they wouldn't give him those cool robes. Frodo sends him away. It's heartbreaking because Sam has been his most loyal friend, and this is where I would bring up our friendship, Tom, and I will give you the floor to apologize for all the times that you have sent me away, even though I have been your loyal Samwise. Go ahead.
I haven't sent you away. If anything, I should apologize for the times that I've asked you to hang out with me.
That's true. You're forgiven. It's been pretty terrible, but whatever. Faramir, oh God, this is so heartbreaking. And they just kind of double it up on you. It's like Sam's heart's crushed. He gets sent away. And, we're going to play some beautiful music. And we're going to have Faramir lead this unit to go take back Osgiliath. And Gandalf is like, listen, don't throw your life away. Your father loves you. He'll remember it in the end. We get Denethor asking for the song from Pippin. And just like, I don't know. It's a rough couple of minutes. I love a beautiful, the Charge of the Light Brigade, but between him singing All Shall Fade, the sky being blotted out by the archers and Faramir's charge, and then to accentuate that with some sweet tomato eating. Farm to table, as God intended, as the good book intended. Ooh.
It's heartbreaking. And the cinematography, I think, does it. Like the way when Pippin starts singing, he starts singing this All Shall Fade, which apparently he was not supposed to originally sing this. I think when the screenwriters heard him sing it like a karaoke when they're all together, like cast and crew in New Zealand.
Really?
And they're like, hey, you've got a good voice. And didn't even have a song to this. They just had the lyrics. And I think the actor actually had to kind of come up with the tune and everything, which is pretty dope because it is just fantastic. But the way all the audio is from him singing, everything else as they're doing the charge, they're shooting the arrows, all that is silent. And it's just, absolutely deafening, the silence of the end of that song. But getting back to the tomato eating, he's eating more than tomato, right? He's eating raw meats and things like that. It's dribbling down his chin. Is that tomato juice down his chin? Or is it the blood of a raw meat? All of it's just terrible, and it just makes me think, if you have misophonia, this seed is just not for you.
What's
chewing or
phonia? What's misophonia?
That's when you have a reaction, I don't know, like what kind of like literally makes you upset, nervous, all that stuff to people that like chew on mic or that like I don't know, like do specific noises, like repetitive, I guess.
All right. Well, I'm not going to start eating this plate of lamb chops that I have medium rare next to me, having just learned that name. I do want to point out that the theme of this movie is that evil people eat in a way that's a little bit messy, because the opening of this movie is Golem eating a raw fish, and they like zoom in on his mouth, and he's like biting the fish and the juices are running down his chin. And in this scene, the red blood tomato is running down his chin. Yeah. So I'm just like, okay, so evil people don't know how to eat and don't use napkins. Thank God we cut from there to Theoden's camp. The horses and the men are nervous because they're in the shadow of the mountain, and it's the road to Dimholt. Arrogant Aragorn, as they call him. I guarantee they call him that at some point, but then they put that guy to death because you can't speak ill of the King of Gondor. Not real thrilled to take the passage of the dead. Merry's dressed up as a soldier. He's like swinging his sword around. And you get this scene with Aramir where he's like, listen, he tells Éowyn, don't humor him. And she's like, why? Why can't he fight? And you can see she's making essentially the argument for herself. Like, does he not have just as much to lose? Does he not have the right? And Éomer, to his, he's like, I don't doubt his heart. I just doubt the reach of his arm. And it's said as kind of like that I think his name is like Haman, kind of laughs at it, but like Éomer's got a point. He's like, hey, his courage is great, but from like a physical standpoint, I doubt that a little bit. But I did think that exchange was interesting. This is where we get Elrond delivering Anduril, the Flame of the West. He gives it to Aragorn. They talk about the murderers and traitors in the mountain that, when they were called by the King of Gondor, did not fulfill their oaths, and so they were banished and cursed. And Elrond tells him, put aside the ranger and be who you were born to be, and take the Dimholt road. And I think this is the point where he draws that sword. And I think there's some chicanery when he draws the sword, because that sword's so long. Like, that would be one that would be difficult to unsheath without stabbing everyone in the tent. Once again, if this was a comedy, everyone stumbles out of that tent, like, bloodied, because they're like, he unsheathed it, and we all got hit in the eye. But that's not what happens.
He pops a big hole in the top of the tent, and all the rain just pops in.
It's just to see everyone outside the tent, you just see the sword stick out the top. Oh, beautiful. Oh, I'm going to write a letter to Peter Jackson, turn this thing into a comedy. Make it longer. I'll tell him, listen, you can have a 5-hour movie. Just put some jokes in it.
Dude, I'm pretty sure the extended cut is 5 hours. I think it's 4.5 hours.
I think I've watched all the extended cuts.
That was my mistake. I watched this with my wife because she had never seen these in theaters or anything, and we watched these a couple of years back. And because I had never seen the extended ones, I'm like, okay, this will be a good time to watch the extended ones. Bad idea, because now my wife is not even listening to this podcast.
Yep,
she's out.
She's abandoned us. And she was the funny one in the group. Éowyn tells Aragorn not to leave. Aragorn's like, listen, baby, what I said was just pillow talk. I'm in love with another. And he's got a great line. It is but a shadow and a thought that you love. A little bit of life advice. If you ever want to break up with someone, just say this. And then walk away and let them, for the rest of their life, be like, it's a shadow and a thought that I love. What the hell does that mean? Like, give them something to think about for the next 20 years. So once again, the line is, it is but a shadow and a thought that you love. And then go off with your dwarf and elf friend into some weird dead passage. And that's how you break up with someone.
Yeah, you text them that and then ghost him. Ghost him. Which I would argue that's kind of what Aragorn's doing right now. He's ghosting
them.
By going to get some ghosts.
Legolas and Gimli are going with him. There's no two ways about it. They are just such loyal friends. Gotta be honest, I don't know that I'm taking the Dimholt road. I think I'm staying with the Rohirrim. Not for me. Narrow canyons, dark caves, green ghosts. I don't love it. Rohan starts discussing why Aragorn left. They're all like, he's leaving on the eve of battle. We're all gonna die. Didn't that elf say something in Elvish about how we're all gonna die last time? But Theoden's like, listen, we're gonna meet him in battle, even if we can't win, which is a great confidence booster. They're like, oh great, Theoden's back to his the old death charge. He tells Eowyn, hey, by the way, I had a will done up by the lawyers. You're going to take over the throne. She very dutifully is like, what other duty would you have me do? And he's like, listen, I would have you smile again, not grieve for those whose time has come. You will see these days renewed, no more despair. And she's like, nope, don't want your throne. I want to go stab someone in the face, which I'm going to do very soon. Spoiler alert. We then cut to the men of the mountain who swore an oath to fight for Gondor. Aragorn gives this great, I do not fear death. And then he walks into the cave.
I think this is where we kind of get like an exposition dump with like Legolas and Gimli kind of saying like why they're going in here. And the fact that they had some kind of oath that they didn't keep. Because it is kind of like fast and loose. And they're going through this plot point very, very quickly.
Right. I relate this whole thing to there was a Lord of the Rings Xbox game that just used a bunch of clips from the movie, and like a big part of it was these green ghost like dudes. And so every time I watch this and I see the green ghosts, I'm just like, isn't that a cutscene from a video game? And then I've got to remind my brain that the movie came first. But I do remember that video game being fun. Merry and Theoden, they have the conversation where a battle's no place for hobbits. Mary's like, all my friends have gotten to fight. Why shouldn't I fight? And this is when Eowyn picks him up and they ride together. Aragorn meets the king of the cursed men of the mountain. They've got a great line. He's like, the king, I think, says something like, I don't suffer no fools. And Aragorn's like, you will suffer me. And then they do have this one thing that's like written in stone, and then it's like their mantra every day when the ghosts wake up and do yoga. They're like, the way is shut. It was made for those who are dead. The way is shut. We are dead. Namaste. And Aragorn's like, namaste this. I summon you to fulfill your oath. The line that was broken has been remade. And they have that cool scene where the ghost tries to cut him with a ghost sword. And he blocks it with a blade that blocks ghost swords.
I was going to ask, would a normal sword, like if this was like Gimli or something putting up the axe, does it go right through the axe and just cut him down? Or is it because this is the fancy
I
sword?
think that's
is it because it's Jonathan?
Yeah, because it's the sword Jonathan, which is very Old Testament of you, by the way. Because it's a super special remade sword, he is the heir of Gondor. He blocks it. But yeah, if Gimli had rolled in there, and I think we see this when they ex machina them at the fields of Pelennor, because they're just cutting through orcs that don't block any ghost blades. But
so you mentioned too about like the green ghosts being like all kind of goofy and kind of video gamey, but I feel like when they do the close-up shots,
I said they were in a video game. I did not say goofy. I did not say video gamey. I just said they were in a video game. I love how they're done. Go ahead, Tom. Ask your question.
I will say, like, the close-up shots, I think they're dope. Like, the way it kind of cuts in from you seeing kind of his whole face. It's like almost one of those little hologram things you put in your face and you kind of tilt it ever so slightly. It kind of changes. It has that effect. I think it's super cool. But when they do, like, the wide shots, the green ghosts are just kind of going through everybody or they're all kind of surrounding them. I think those aren't quite as clean as the close-up of the King of the Dead.
Sure. I think whoever did these guys went on the Haunted Mansion ride in Disneyland and was like, oh, that's how holograms work. Oh, I can do this in a movie and a video game. But I'm with you. Yeah, the like flowing ghosts murdering everyone is different for me than these close-up scenes where you get to see like the decaying flesh of a cursed king, which I actually think look pretty cool. Aragorn's ultimate thing is fight for us and you will regain your honor. And I'm assuming that the ghosts from Pirates of the Caribbean that stole all that Aztec gold were also of the same crew because it's kind of the same. But I digress.
Yeah, totally.
We see the gathering of the Mordor army in Pelennor Fields outside of Minas Tirith. Faramir gets dragged to the gate by a very good horse and brought to Denethor. The army of Mordor fires some heads into the city, which...
That was brutal.
In terms of psychological warfare, just great. I guess both psychological and chemical warfare, because there's probably going to be some diseases that come with those rotting heads. And also, if you picked it up and you were like, Uncle Greg, you'd probably not have a whole lot of heart to fight, but it is what it is. No. Denethor's like, the line of Sturs have ended. They've killed Faramir. He's a real negative Nancy. He blames Rohan immediately. He's like, where's Theoden? Where's Rohan? He then screams, abandon your post. Flee for your lives. And who shows up to hit him in the face with a stick? Gandalf. Oh, so good.
Should have done that a lot sooner.
Oh, so sooner. If there, I mean, it should be legal in your life where someone is screaming nonsense that if you have a wizard staff, you can hit him in the forehead and be like, it's like a reset button. Like, stop. But that's not legal because that would be assault. Don't at me. The catapult and trebuchet duel happens. And by that I mean the Mordor's catapulting. They're shooting cats.
Well, they can't catapult. They have to catapult.
The dogapult. And then the trebuchet is Gondor firing. I thought it was a little bit interesting that Gondor decided to fire pieces of their wall at them, and I'd be like, well, maybe don't reduce your wall and shoot it at them. You kind of need those walls, but sometimes we're a little bit short-sighted as corrupt and evil men, as Elrond describes us. The Nazgul attack once again. I mean, the best death would be to picked up in those claws and then for a couple of seconds be like, I'm flying! Look, Dad, I'm flying! And then the horrible crunch.
I'm a real boy!
Oh, man. We get some siege towers. Gandalf double guns it, and by that I mean he's using his staff and his sword, which I believe is called Glamdring. Pippin saves Gandalf, because Gandalf's like, go away, you have no use in this battle. Nope, Pippin stabs some dude, I'm assuming in the groin. And then we have the cool scene where I do appreciate, like, there are certain flavor flourishes that they put on these movies. Like, I don't know if in the books they described this gate ram as a flaming wolf head. Maybe they did. Once again, maybe I should have looked it up, but it's just such a cool, like, look. It's like, for one, I don't know how they did it. I don't know how the thing's not just burning. I don't know how there's just flame in his mouth. But a swinging, like, on pivoting chain wolf head that slams into the gate but also has fire in its mouth. It's just such a cool look. Like, I don't know.
I think, too, like, what they do with a lot of, like, the armor, like, whereas all the elvish stuff is just gorgeous and everything is ornate for the sake of being ornate. Everything for the orcs and those guys is usually just hammered out, very purposeful for what it needs to do. But this is kind of just, to your point, a cool flourish that looks super dope. Yeah,
it's like what a defense contractor, they were like, listen, what's it going to cost us to get a gate ram that's about 30 feet long and can put down a gate that, I don't know, probably has... We probably need to put like 1,000 pounds of pressure on it per swing. Also, we want this ram to look like a wolf with flames in its mouth. And the contractor's like, I don't know. We're going to have to probably hire on about 50 more engineers. Anyways, and then it has to go through the process of like being approved. And they've got to put out bids to other companies because, obviously, because of Dick Cheney, you can't just give your friends the contracts. Anyways, I digress. Frodo and Gollum enter a cave. We discover it's I think it's Shelob. It's Shelob, Shelob's lair. He uses a little bit of the file of Galadriel, which is the light of their star. Frodo gets caught in a web. I've never liked this because I'm just not a spider guy. I'm not an insect guy. I live in a house where spiders and scorpions show up at random. I don't like it. And I do appreciate that Frodo and Smeagol get into a fight. And once again, Frodo could just crush this dude's skull, but then Smeagol plays the victim, and Frodo's like, I'll show mercy for like the 5th time, and lets him go. Galadriel shows up in Frodo's mind to encourage him. I don't know if this is some sort of starvation hallucination or what.
I don't know. Maybe
happens.
it's like part of the vial or whatever that he gets, so that she has the light. It's like part of her is speaking through it. I don't know. But,
no.
Yeah, it kind of gives him this extra little burst.
If you get a Galadriel hallucination, you've got to crack the vial open and then snort a couple of lines of the vial in order to get that straight, or rub it on your gums. Yes, Stardust. Narsil. All right. Frodo gets caught in a web, and we cut.
I do like
there.
these effects, like all the like webs and stuff that they do, and how he gets like suspended in the webs. It's pretty cool. I do appreciate that stuff. It made me think of the production value of all of this, like setting up all these caves. Every take that he's running through and messing up all these webs, they got to go back and do it all again.
Sure.
Like, it is incredibly impressive.
Well, what's interesting is like the production value of these movies is so good, and like so much of it looks great that when it looks bad, it's like
It's true.
it like takes you out of it. It's like there's so many times like they seamlessly like do CGI and like big battle scenes, and then it's like the weird moments where the Hobbit's getting dragged by a fish in the river, and you're like give the same attention to detail to that moment as you did to the ghost running through orcs at Pelennor Field. Like, I don't know. Once again, I love these movies. These are nitpicks that like the movie doesn't deserve. And for a movie that's almost 20 years old now, is 20 years old, it still looks great.
Yeah.
But I think there are the times it goes bad is so glaring because it looks good for so much of it.
Agreed.
We get the night attack on Minas Tirith. Gandalf leads the men to the gates. And I think that this is the point where he's like, listen, no matter what comes through these gates, you are men of Gondor. He gives them the sweet speech. And then it's like all those giant cave trolls or whatever come screaming through. Anyways, Pippin's watching Faramir's funeral procession, even though Faramir's not dead. Bring me wood and oil. That's not what you want your... if you're kind of comatose, you don't want your dad screaming about wood and oil because it's going to turn out bad. Frodo gets took by Shiloh. Sam fights with Sting in the light of a star. Frodo's in a cocoon. Frodo's dead. And then we go to credits. Dick Clark, produced by Dick Clark, flashes across the screen. And it goes dun dun. And then we're done with these movies.
Dick Wolf.
Dick
Dick
Wolf.
Clark.
What did I say? Dick Clark. No,
You
Dick
said
Clark,
Dick Clark.
welcomes in the new year. The ball drops. Oh, these movies are so long. All right, we fade to black. The orcs come in. They find the body. Pippin tries to stop Faramir from burning. Denethor. There's a lot going on as we cut back and forth.
There's a lot of cuts.
Denethor drags Pippin away, and he's like, go now and die in what way seems best to you.
It's kind of telling because that's what he's like doing. He feels this is the way that he needs to die with his son, even though his son is not dead, and he's been told that. But he's just so like laser focused on what he wants to do.
He's given up. He's given up. And this is what.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad said it to me when I graduated high school. I'm assuming it's what every dad says to their kid when they graduate high school. But go now and die in what way seems best to you. And I was like, Dad, I'm going to go to college. He's like, nope. Anyways, Theoden arrives on the field of Pelennor. And good God, Tom, I love
the horns.
Theoden.
You get all these horns. Yes.
I love Theoden so much. He's such a great character. It's like Tolkien poured all of the best speeches into him. And so he's in front of his dudes. And let's put aside like what the acoustics are for someone shouting in front of, I don't know, 8,000 people on a field, like who actually heard him. Braveheart has the same issue.
Well, like, there's a rule, though. When you're on a battlefield and your king is screaming at you, like, every 10th guy has to whisper it to the other guy, and then he screams it to another guy. It's a long line.
He's like, I think he said a ride. We're supposed to ride, and then riders of Deodin? I don't know who Deodin
I love the telephone game that would happen on the battlefield.
Spores will be spitted on. I don't
Filled with laughter? What?
Yeah. Anyways, it's arise, arise, riders of Theoden. Fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter. Spear shall be shaken, shield will be splintered. A sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises. Ride now to Gondor. In the movie, he says, ride to ruin and the world's end. And it's just so great. And then what does everyone shout? They all shout death. Death is their chant. Death. What a dope way to go. Everyone shout death. Even Mary shouting death. Eowyn shouting death. They're all like, let's go die. Oh, it's so great. It's so great.
I don't think I caught this like in the initial watches when I saw it when I was like in the theaters, but watching now with like the captions and stuff on, like all screaming death, it is like so much more powerful. I recently even saw a little snippet from Tolkien himself talking about like what is Lord of the Rings about, and he mentions very specifically like it's about death and how like the stories of death and how it's inevitable for everybody. He's got this very interesting, just kind of philosophy around it, and the way he speaks to it is just so eloquent and beautiful. And to have it epitomed in Theoden and the way he rallies these troops to go and die for the honor and for humankind, it's just epic.
It's so lovely. So lovely.
He does this cool sequence too, like after given this deal, he kind of like runs next to or rides his horse next to that front line, and he's kind of using his spear or his sword to tap the spears of all the kind of the front riders, kind of more or less, I guess, blessing the spears with the king's sword, which I think is dope. But apparently that was not even scripted. That was something that actor who played Theoden thought about that on the day, and they filmed it and they loved it. They kept it in.
No, it's great. I mean, it's the same. It's like fist bumping before going into a fist fight. It's just like human contact. Hey, dude, I've got your back. You've got mine. Like, I don't know. It's I love every.
There was that one guy with like a relatively weak spear, and it breaks when he goes by, and he's like, crap. I just got a stick.
The spearhead just fell off. And he's like, all right. He's like, well, I'll move to the back line. And they're like, no, you're staying with us. And he's like, oh, great. So some orc's just going to get really bruised.
Splintered.
Splintered. Orc the Splintered. We cut to Denethor, who, just as much as a leader of Theoden, I would put these guys on the same pedestal in terms of warlords. What's Denethor doing? Covering himself in some sort of sweet, sweet, smooth oil, telling them to light the fire. And this is where Gandalf and Pippin come in. Gandalf does this sweet like skid with a horse that no one's ever done before, where he then throws Pippin on top of the fire, and they roll Faramir.
Pippin jumps off, right? Like this is Pippin doing this himself. Like he
Yeah.
pops on to save Faramir, and like his sheer size and how much effort he had to give just to kind of push and shove him off was super cool. And it's cool to see Pippin having this heroic moment.
Sure. And this is quite possibly the most memorable of the... Because, like, we find out Faramir's still alive, but Denethor, covered in oil, catches a little bit of flame, and then he takes off. First off, it's tough to run in a gown. It's tough to run in a gown covered in oil. It's tough to run in a gown covered in oil that's aflame. And where does old Denethor go, Tom?
He goes the entire length of seemingly 8 football fields to the very poorly designed hole in this wall at the end of Minas Tirith. Super cool visual, but just a super silly moment.
Right. The movie cheats a little bit because that is a long run, and they cut from him like running from the Faramir Death Pier to him jumping off that edge. But to your point, that's like a 3-minute sprint. Like, and he's an old man who's only been living on farm-to-table tomatoes. Like, he's probably going to get a little bit tired.
Have you ever been lit on fire? When you get lit on fire, it literally lights a fire under your feet.
Sure,
It'll
that's
make you
fair.
run fast.
There should have been a scene where halfway through he's like bent over, hands on knees, like, and then he restarts his sprint. Like,
he's taking deep breaths while on fire.
anyways, I don't know. I might be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure I watched this in theaters and people laughed during that scene. But
I think so too.
it is what it is. We should mention that Theoden and their charge is awesome. They're just like cutting dudes down, and they're ruining the orcs. And you're like, yes, Rohan is crushing people. And then who shows up but the Easterlings and the Timothy Oliphants, as you like to call them. And Theoden's like, reform the line. And then they charge the Oliphants because that's all you can do. Éomer spears an Oliphant pilot. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, like kind of like just takes down the whole Oliphant, which I think the Oliphant like falls over and uses tusks and hits another one, so it's like a 2-for-1. But I love how like all these guys, like, because like to your point, there's only so much you can do to try to stop these beasts, and they have like, I think later sequences you see these Oliphants like just riddled with arrows. It's
Right.
like Oliphant acupuncture, which is great.
Sure.
So I'm sure they were just loving it.
Eastern pain relief, as they call it.
They are the
Éomer
Easterlings.
double blades it. She pulls out 2 swords and just starts cutting legs, which is awesome. Gandalf and Pippin are sitting there waiting at the gate to open, and they have this great line where Pippin says something like, I didn't think this is how this would end. And Gandalf says, end? No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path, one that we all must take. The gray rain curtain of this world rolls back, and all turns to silver glass, and then you see it. And Pippin's like, what? What do you see? And Gandalf says, white shores and beyond, a far green country under a swift sunrise. And Pippin's like, well, that isn't so bad. And Gandalf's like, no, it isn't. And I looked this up, and apparently this description of a gray curtain rolling back and all turn is actually when Frodo takes the journey to the Grey Havens at the end. And so this is like a description of the elves in the afterlife. But internet, don't get after me, but like deep internet, deep Tolkien lore would be like, well, for men and hobbits, this is not necessarily their end. We don't really know how they end. This is like Gandalf and the elves. They get to enter this like sweet afterlife. So anyways, it's a lovely moment where Gandalf gives his eloquent,
He gives hope, right?
description. Yeah, that's
he
what
gives
it
hope
is.
to Pippin,
It's hope
who's-
of, hey, this isn't all there is. There's something after this. Which Tom and I are going to take the next hour to talk about the afterlife and what it means to us. And so
We've
but
roped you
before
guys
that,
in. This is all a ploy.
now that I've got you alone, Tom, let me tell you a little bit about what happens when you die. The Nazgul attack Theoden.
The look on his face too when that like Nazgul comes in and it's flying right at him, and he like gives his look to camera. He's like, "Well, I'm screwed. This is
Yeah.
not great."
He gets thrown around. Golly, my man, King Theoden. And then the Nazgul about to feast on his flesh. And this, honestly, like, if I could, like, condense all of these movies to, like, one scene, and, like, if I could make my kids watch one scene, like, over and over, it's, like, this one. Where the Nazgul is about to feast on the flesh of Theoden, and Éowyn steps in the gap, and no one else is there, everyone else is cowering, and Éowyn in not a great disguise steps in there, and then she cuts off this Nazgul's head, and the Witch King threatens to, stand aside. And there's two versions of this. There's the book version, there's the movie version, but essentially in the movie version it's the Witch King saying, no man can kill me. And then the response from Éowyn, I think as she tears off her helmet, is, I am no man. And then, like, stabs him in the face. And it's just such a great, like, I don't know. It's such a great moment.
It gets me absolutely every single time. Like I get like chills like thinking about it or hearing that line where she delivers it. It's poetic. It's beautiful. It's fantastic.
Right. And Once again, I love it. She does it, like, the actress that plays Éowyn is great. Like, the build up to this, like, we talked about it in the Two Towers of her, like, hey, I fear a cage. I fear being, like, sidelined so that I can never do anything of valor or bravery. And then to have this moment where there is a Rohirrim of men that do not stand in the gap, and she's the one that's there to defend her kin, is so good. And then in the books, because I looked this up, just the like dialogue between Éowyn and the Witch King, and it's the Witch King threatens that he will bear thee away to the houses of lamentation beyond all darkness, where flesh shall be devoured, and thy shriveled mind will be left naked to the lidless eye. He boasts, no living man may hinder me. Whereupon Éowyn removes her helmet and declares, but no living man am I. You look upon a woman, Éowyn. I am Éowyn's daughter. You stand between me and my lord and kin. Begone, if you not be deathless, for living or dark, undead, I will smite you if you touch him. And then she kills him, and it's great.
It's awesome. Incredible.
Yeah. Anyways, I would pump that scene into my veins, into my kids' veins. It's such a great moment.
Just to be clear, what you want to pump into your kids' veins is an animal getting decapitated and a Night King getting stabbed in the face.
It is an evil Nazgul with evil intentions, and then it is a Witch King who has come to decimate men, their freedom, and hates America. So yes, I want to pump that into my kids' veins.
So it's kind of like quails and the grubworm population.
Oh man, you're really minimizing this. The quail are decimating the grubworm population, Tom. Anyways, I love the scene. It's great. It's so powerful. To your point, like, it is great to say to watch Éowyn like have this climactic moment, and it's done so well. And then you also see like this sacrifice like does not come without penalty. Like her arm shrivels, like she's clearly wounded. Oh, we also see Mary stab.
Yeah, Mary comes in.
Yeah, Mary comes in, stabs him in the leg, which is also in the books. That gives her the ability to stab him in the face. I would watch this so much more than watching Legolas, I don't know, skateboard up and down an Oliphant as he shoots him with arrows. I don't care.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Legolas only counts as one.
Theoden dies in front of Éowyn. Éowyn, my body is broken. You have to let me go. I go to my fathers, in whose mighty company I shall not feel ashamed. And his last word before he dies is Éowyn. And it's sad because I love Theoden.
It's a beautiful end for that character. Again, poetic about him fighting and dying in battle. But having Éowyn there with him while he passes is just, again, incredibly powerful. And I think some of the best sequences and scenes in the entire movie.
Right. This is why this is my favorite movie out of the three. What's also sad is Pippin then finds Merry on the battlefield.
Well, before you get to this, I think you skipped over it a little bit, but we had like all of the army of the dead kind of coming in, and they kind of come from the shores or whatever. I guess the initial plan was more orcs were going to arrive there, but the ghost army kind of comes and they kind of wreck shop to more or less close out the battle, right?
Right. You get Aragorn jumping over the side of the ship, looking as cool as anyone has ever looked.
Yeah.
And then that green ghost goo just sweeping up and down to Ex Machina everyone off the battlefield.
But I love this sequence too. Yeah, when Pippin finds Merry on the battlefield, and he's there to help him, and they have this beautiful conversation back and forth. There's apparently like in this background, and you may not notice it while you watched it, but it's huge. They have an Oliphant carcass kind of in the background while they're filming this. So he's actually kind of like in between the legs of it. But apparently Peter Jackson like insisted that he wanted this to be a prop on set and not just to be like a CGI element. Okay. So at the time when this movie was released, that like Oliphant was like the biggest prop that has ever been made for a movie.
Really?
Because he wanted them to feel the scale. Because it's also had to be not only bigger than or gigantic because it's a gigantic mythical elephant,
Right.
but it had to be even bigger because they were filming the halflings. So the perspective wise, it needed to be even bigger than the CGI elements they did. So really, really cool. And I didn't look to see if I'm sure there's maybe been another bigger movie prop, but at the time it was its biggest.
Okay. So they killed a real elephant and put it in the background of this movie. If you don't like that, you can email Tom. We cut then to inside Mordor. The orcs are fighting over dead Frodo's stuff. The orcs and other orcs fight. I do think this is an interesting, and it's Tolkien once again, but it's like the culture of orcs and like the cutthroat way in which we like live our lives and will stab and thieve and like that kind of morality versus what like the other the good side's morality looks like, I think is always awesome and interesting. But not that I'm a good person and wouldn't stab someone over some mithril chainmail, but that's just me. I mean, I wouldn't stab them if they were wearing the mithril chainmail. I would get the mithril chainmail off them after I stab them
Fair.
in a different place
Of
that
course.
didn't have mithril. Everyone does. And this is where Sam rolls up and rescues Frodo. And this is Sam the warrior just dropping bodies.
I like this. At first, you get a silhouette, and you think like he's just gonna scare these like 3 orcs off or whatever. But like he kind of comes around, and he's just a little halfling. So then they
Right.
kind of attack him, and he just takes all 3 of them on. He's like, "That's for Frodo. That's for the Shire, and this is for my old gaffer." Which is good to see a Ted Lasso shout out. I
Sure.
appreciated that.
The gaffer. The gaffer.
What is that referencing? What is the gaffer to Samwise here?
So the gaffer is his dad, and I think a
Okay.
gaffer in the Shire is like a gardener. That's what I always assumed. He was like
Okay. Not a
that-
soccer coach.
Right, not a soccer. He kills all the orcs. Sam has the ring, which he gives to Frodo, not without some complicated feelings, because Frodo's like, "Where is it?" And Sam's like, "I have it here." And once again, another actor doing a great job of, hey, should I give this ring up, or should I become the most powerful Samwise Gamgee in the world? But he passes the test. He gives it to Frodo because he's Samwise Gamgee. And then we get disguise time. They dress up as orcs. And this enters us
Adorable little
into
orcs.
the third act. And I don't know if this is officially the third act, but dude, my only critique of this movie, I've had no critique so far, is just this is where we enter a bit of the long slog. And if you've been drinking and it's late at night, this is kind of where you start to tune out. But they still have this like great scene where, or not great scene, but great sequence where they attack the Black Gates. So Aragorn decides he wants to attack the Black Gates in order to distract Sauron.
And like it gives like Legolas gives that line. He's like, "A diversion." Well, it's like, yeah, no S, Sherlock. We all know that it's a diversion.
They're like, "Listen, we gotta pay Orlando Bloom, so let's give him a line." Which is great because Gimli comes back with certainty of death, small chance of success. What are we waiting for? And he gives it so great. We then cut
Great
to
Gimli.
like the Eye of Sauron, like finding Frodo, and he does this great like pratfall. It's like this weird, like I can see it in my brain even right now. Just I was like, no one's ever fallen like that ever in their life. We cut to Aragorn shouting at the gate, and the gates of Mordor open. I'm pretty sure, once again, I've watched the extended version. I'm pretty sure there's an extended version of this where like the Mordor sends out their champions and they like have like a little group meeting and they like kill the Mordor like champions, like messengers or whatever.
Emissary or wherever, yeah. I think apparently in this sequence too, from what I read, that initially and I think they actually filmed it, was Aragorn was going to fight Sauron. Like they were going to have him be in physical form, and that's who Aragorn was going to fight.
Really?
Or Aragorn, excuse me. But apparently they used the same fight sequence that Aragorn does here in a little bit with just that massive cave troll, and they
Okay.
just changed the CGI. So what Aragorn was fighting is actually was supposed to be a CGI version of Sauron. But they just
Okay.
changed it to the cave troll at the end, which
Yeah.
again, I think made sense.
Yeah.
'Cause that's I think how the book did not necessarily create a version of a living Sauron.
Because then what's the point of throwing the ring into Mount Doom if Aragorn has to fight him in physical form? Yeah.
But super cool visuals too, like when the gates finally start opening and then you see the eye kind of in the background. You can see Mount Doom there too. And apparently it was like filmed in the deserts there in New Zealand. And because they needed so many extras for this sequence, they actually used the New Zealand army, like this is like where they trained. So they actually used them as extras for a lot of these sequences.
Sure.
It's pretty cool.
It's like when Katy Perry used all those Amtrackers to do that music video. I know what you're talking about. They march out, they surround Gondor and Rohan, and then we get Aragorn's great speech. And listen, I love Aragorn. I love him to death. If I had one critique of Aragorn, it's that his voice can be a little bit on the whiny side, just a little bit.
Ooh, you're calling him out.
I don't know if that makes sense. It's just a little, he's no Theoden. Let me just say that.
Okay, that's fair. There's not a whole lot of people that are.
No one can crush the Titanic and an army of orcs in Pelennor Field quite like that guy. But this is where Oregon. I'm sober. This is where Aragorn gives a speech. He says, "I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me. A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day, an hour of wolves and shattered shields, when the age of men comes crashing down. But it is not this day. This day we fight. By all that you hold dear, all this good earth, I bid you stand, men of the West." And it's great. It's a great moment.
It is fantastic. I agreed.
Frodo and Sam are climbing up the mountain.
I love this sequence is super cool where he's like, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. Which again, maybe just want to chant Rudy while it's in the theater.
Finally, we have the moment where Legolas and Gimli admit that they're friends, which is great. Sauron talks to Aragorn, calls him LSR.
What is that a reference to? Is that,
that's his Elvish name. That's his Elvish name.
Okay.
And then he screams for Frodo, and they charge. Gollum shows up out of nowhere and attacks. Gandalf calls for the eagles. There's a lot going on during this sequence. Frodo and Sam enter Mount Doom. Frodo, much like Isildur, doesn't really want to let this sweet ring of power go because so far it's done him only good things, like giving him those bags under his eyes and like burned scars into the neck area because of the chain being so heavy. Gollum attacks invisible Frodo, bites off the ring, bites off a finger and takes the ring. And then Gollum goes over and Frodo kind of seems like he wants to jump in there too.
Yeah, apparently when they first filmed this sequence, and I don't, maybe you recall how it happened in the books, but I guess the initial one was Peter Jackson wanted to film it where Frodo was like actually pushed Gollum off the cliff or whatever. But I don't think that's how it happened in the books, and he wanted to be true to it and had it made it seem like kind of more of an accident, how they kind of just slipped off the edge and then Frodo kind of grabs onto the ledge. But yeah, he kind of, as Sam's reaching down to try to grab his arm and help him, Frodo's kind of like, man, like at this point, I just need to let go because he's just lost all hope now that he doesn't have the ring and he just, he doesn't have any life back into him. And I think it's kind of an interesting kind of callback to Frodo saving Sam from drowning by kind of grabbing his arm. This is kind of the reverse where you've got Sam grabbing Frodo as he's falling to his doom.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think in the books Frodo pushes Gollum. I think it's Gollum is so infatuated with the ring that he falls on his own. I could be wrong on that. But the ring is destroyed. It floats on the lava for a little while. And you're like,
so dramatic.
Cool. And then it goes in. And the tower collapses. The army cheers. And everyone then starts to cry because Mountain Doom explodes.
Yeah, there's like, Frodo, he did it. Oh no, this is not good.
But as they're on their little island, as the lava flows by, the eagles save them, as eagles are wont to do. Tom, I'll give you the next 30 minutes to go through your favorite Eagles songs. I'm sorry, the Eagles songs.
I feel like I like the Eagles, but I couldn't give you a song.
Yeah, other than what they make you play on Guitar Hero, I don't know either. From here, we go to a Rivendell reunion. There's a lot of soft filter and weird slow motion jumping.
And giggling. Lots of giggling.
I can't stand any of it. It's such a weird... anyways... Maybe we're not in Rivendell.
This starts like
Maybe
the
we're
endings.
back in Minas Tirith. Yeah, these are all the endings. Aragorn gets
Yeah.
crowned. Aragorn sings, which some life advice for everyone out there. If you're ever in a ceremony, out of nowhere, just start singing. Don't tell people what you're doing. Be Billy from Outer Range. Just start singing.
Exactly.
Everyone will love it. Aragorn sings. Arwen shows up, but she doesn't
Very
show up like a
dramatically.
normal
I don't know
person.
why she's hiding. Yeah, she's hiding behind a banner. I mean, it's just extra drama that we didn't need here.
This is called Elvish tradition, Tom. Everyone knows that when an Elvish lady is showing up to her lord's crowning, she shows up behind a weird paper banner that she then lights on fire and lets fly into the sky, like in the movie Tangled, which we're going to do next. Everyone bows to Frodo because he goes to bow to Aragorn. And talk me through this sequence, Tom.
Oh man, this is another one of those scenes that like gets me every time. Like I'm still invested in the ending of this movie at this point. And when Aragorn gives him the line, he's like you bow to no one, and then he bows and everybody else does. Like again, the CGI is a little bit wonky, doesn't hold up quite as well, but just a super powerful moment, and it just kind of gives me like chills watching it. It's awesome.
No, it's great because ultimately this Hobbit's the one that saved everyone and the reason they're all still breathing. And
movie should have ended.
Should have moved. Yeah, you're right. Should have ended right there. I did think like, hey, if I was in a crowd and like I couldn't hear what was going on, but everyone started bowing, would I bow or would I be like, hey guys, what are we doing? Like, why are we bowing?
Your
Who
king
are we
is
bowing
there,
to?
man. If somebody else is bowing, it's because
but what
it's
if one
like
guy-
the same thing with Theoden screaming in the line. Somebody hears it, somebody else does it 10 feet away, so it's just like a wave of bows.
What if one dude went down to like tie his shoe, and then the next guy was like, "Oh, he's bowing," and then all of a sudden you have this like this effect, this waterfall effect, this wave effect of everyone bowing, and then it was just like, no, that one dude was tying his shoes. Like, I don't want to be the idiot that's like, "Oh, I bowed too." I want to be the idiot that's like, "Hey, why are we bowing?" Anyways, we're back at the Shire. I'm gonna move real quick. Sam marries Rose. It's great. She's a barkeep. He likes booze. Frodo finishes the book. He talks about how his wound still hurts after 4 years. I'd be like, see a doctor, maybe get some pain meds. Frodo gets hooked on pain meds, goes down a dark road, goes into rehab, comes out later, goes back into rehab. Frodo, they all go on some sort of journey with the elves to the last ship. Because Bilbo's going out. They're like, hey. And Bilbo's like, listen, I'm 100 years old. I look like death. But, hey, did you ever know what happened to that ring of mine? And Frodo's like, no. Do you have any pills? And the elves are all leaving because it's the time of men. And I hope the elves treat Bilbo okay because he looks like Albert Einstein, but he's 3 feet tall. And Gandalf's like, hey, peace, I'm going to go too. F you guys, good luck. And it's the end of the fellowship. Oh, by the way, don't weep, or I would say don't weep, but not all tears are evil. That's a line from Gandalf. And then, should Frodo have given these guys a heads up that he was bouncing, Tom? Should he have given
Probably
these
a
guys
little bit. Yeah, he kind of gives them the quick little hugs and goodbyes and stuff, but yeah, it was pretty abrupt.
Listen,
And I'd ask you questions about this. I don't know how much I care about it, but like, where are they going? What are they doing? I don't understand this whole idea.
So the elves who are immortal are leaving Middle-earth to go to the Grey Havens, I believe. And so it's like their heaven, essentially. They're like departing the mortal earth to go on boats to somewhere where it's all peaceful and they're going to live forever. So that's what they're extending to Bilbo and Frodo as ring bearers. They are extending to them a eternal life where there will be no sadness and everyone will be great and they'll all be decked out in cool garb. but they're going to be the only two hobbits there, so everyone's going to kind of look at them kind of funny, and so you're like, well, eternity with people that don't look like me, and probably it's a different culture. Isn't that heaven? I don't know. Maybe I should just take a moral death and take all these pills. Anyways, I don't know. So many endings, Tom. I got to be honest. I got to put about hour 3, and then I punched out, and then I had to come back and finish the movie.
Yeah, this was a movie that I admittedly watched in sequences, like the big battle sequences, the setups, and this ending bit. Like I knew it was coming. It's almost become like a gag when you talk about like movies that just keep going and going and ending. It's like, oh yeah, it's like The Return of the King, Lord of the Rings. It's become a running joke.
Right, and I think it's interesting. They also, for as much as Jackson tried to like extend these, there are parts in the books where like when they come back to the Shire, Wormtongue is there and is like taking over the Shire. So there's like a battle for the Shire. They cut that out completely. There's like parts where Pippin and Merry are supposed to be like giant hobbits because they spent time with the Ents and like drank their water and food, and so they became like they grew exponentially. So there's like stuff they cut out of it, but I see why they did, because this movie is 3 hours and 40 minutes long, and that's not even the director's cut. Anyways, real quick, Tom, let's go through this. Best scenes, favorite scene. Did you have a favorite scene in this movie?
I feel like, to your point, like everything that happens in that battle on that the fields, the fields, like everything in that sequences, I think is fantastic. And I think of that, it's got to be the Rohirrim charge, and how like that speech, to your point, Theoden getting them all and them kind of showing up and just plowing through all those guys. It's probably one of my favorite moments.
Yep. Okay, my favorite scene is Éowyn killing the Witch King. I love it. It's so good.
Gotta be. Yeah.
I will also mention that Éowyn and Faramir make eyes at each other, and spoiler alert, they get married and have babies. So happy ending for Éowyn and Faramir, who lives. Best quote of the movie. Did you have a best quote, Tom, or a favorite quote?
I feel like mine would probably be another Gimli kind of one-liner when Legolas, very theatrically takes down the elephant and all the guys on said elephant, and then slides down the trunk like, the sweet skateboarder that he is. And then Gimli tells him that it still only counts as one, which is fantastic.
Mine's Theoden's speech before the charge. Arise, arise, riders of Theoden. Fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter. It leads with everyone chanting death. I mean, if a quote ends with everyone chanting death in a enthusiastic manner, it's always going to be my favorite quote. If I had to pick my fighter for this movie, it'd be Theoden. I love Theoden. Actually, maybe I'd go with Éowyn, because she stabs the Witch King in the face, whereas no one else could defeat him. But her being no mortal man stabbed him in the face. I loved Éowyn. She was great.
I would say, if I had to pick a fighter, it's got to be the Tony Hawk of his day, Legolas. He's just incredible.
So great. Stuff we would change. If we could change anything, I hit on some of these things earlier. The slow flaming bowling ball scene with, is it Pippin? I'm going to get Pippin and Merry confused, but that scene is weird, and then the weird fish drag in the beginning. I just go back and
it's
fix
like
those.
Yeah, the fish stuff, like they're just trying to do that not forced perspective, but like showing how much bigger this normal size fish seemingly is to a hobbit. I think that's the idea, but I agree. It does not hold up and looks goofy. But for me, it's just got to be the endings. Like, I get that there's a lot of source material stuff, and there's a lot of stuff in the book, and you want to tie all these characters and give them a happy little bow, but it wasn't needed. It should have ended when they were all bowing to Frodo and the hobbits.
Yeah, I agree. And then the themes, just the important themes of, and I don't know. These books are so great. The movies are so great. I think we talked about like the importance of, even though these are fantasy stories, the importance of these types of stories and what they bring to light in terms of courage and selflessness and perseverance are just great themes for people to hear, for kids to hear. I made a tongue-in-cheek comment about the theme in this movie is that evil people eat in gross ways. That's probably not the main theme, but like you just see so much like courage in this, from Eowyn to, you know, Frodo and Sam going all the way to the end. These movies are excellent in their representation of courage and valor and selflessness. That I think they're important, and they're just a lot of fun to watch. And I have shown these to my 9-year-old and 7-year-old. They enjoyed them. You know, they weren't too scary. Obviously, they don't get maybe the deeper meaning, but once again, it's like show them what courage and valor looks like. And so hopefully as they get older, they'll read the books and rewatch these. But I had a lot of fun watching all these movies. And even though this one may have not been my favorite, simply because of the length, I guess, it's still a great movie that is heads and tails above a lot of other movies. So I'm glad we got
and
to
I think
do
this is, yeah, for sure. And I, like we said in the beginning, this is why I put this trilogy up as, you know, some of the best movies that I think have ever been created as a sequence of movies. Like, there's a good movie in a handful of 3 every once in a while, but for all 3 to be this impactful and this powerful and so well adapted by Peter Jackson and everybody involved is tremendous. And that's why I'm super excited to be able to get back into Middle-earth and see what they do with the Rings of Power, because there's such brilliant source material already with Lord of the Rings. I know the Silmarillions, it's kind of its own beast, but very interested to see kind of how they adapt and how they do more of this, because it's going to be fun to rejoin this world after 20-some years.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we appreciate all of you for joining us. We want to give some shout-outs to just people that have listened to us and supported us. John out there in Louisiana. John of Texas out there in Louisiana. We appreciate your support and sticking with us. And we appreciate those of you that write us and write questions and engage. It's always fun to hear from people, because Tom and I obviously just do this as 2 friends that like to talk to each other and have decided to record it. I don't know that there's more to it than that, but we appreciate all of you that have engaged and enjoyed this. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us at teambingepodcast@gmail.com. Tom, what are our other handles?
We've got Team Binge Podcast through Twitter, and Team Binge on Twitter, and then Team Binge Podcast on Instagram. And generally we'll post and try to engage. So please reach out to us, follow us, like us, rate us on your different podcast apps.
Just once again, we are here because Amazon is releasing the Rings of Power, which is September, what, Tom?
September 1st. So they just announced, yeah. But you'll probably know this by the time you listen to this. But yeah, so September 1st and September 2nd is when they're going to release the first 2 episodes. So we'll do our best to try to record those and get them out to you guys as soon as we can. But our plan is to watch these weekly, get them out for you so we can really enjoy the show together. But yeah, thanks again, Julian. I appreciate the ride, and excited for the new series.
Me too. I've been Julian.
And I've been Tom. Adios, everybody.